Hello. I was just thinking, are we still into our intro music? It's so, it's a background sound to my life, and I'm so used to it. I can't even see it clearly anymore. Hi, it's Jen, by the way. Welcome to Fat Mascara. DM me, message me, text us, 646-481-8182. Do we need new music? I don't know if it's time. I still kind of love it. Anyway, I want your thoughts. Jess is going to be here in just a second, and that's a good thing because we are going to need her art history degree for this interview. So it's Friday, and we are speaking with Rachael Gibson, who is a writer, editor, and producer working in the beauty industry. She's had many jobs. She still has many jobs, but one of which is working with LWPR, a communications agency specializing in the hair industry. And she was previously, and I think this is how Jess met her, she was previously producer of beauty programs at Mastered, the startup online education company. But her claim to fame, at least for me, is that she's known in our industry as the hair historian, and she's become a go-to expert on the culture of hair and how hair has played a role in history and art and what the future of hair trends will be. So if you don't follow her on Instagram, you can pause us, go ahead and pause us, go over there and follow the account at the hair historian. I think we've talked about it on the show in the past, but she curates a collection of art with an eye on the hair and how it's presented. So you can really start to see that everything old is new again, when it comes to hair at least, but probably a lot of beauty trends. She's also just so much fun to chat with, so we hope you'll love her as much as we do. Please welcome Jess to the studio and also welcome the hair historian, Rachael Gibson. Okay, Rachael, welcome to Fat Mascara. Hi, how are you?
I'm really good. Thank you for having me. Big fan.
Where are you calling us from? Like, where's your home studio?
So I am in Catford, which is in South London.
Okay. All right. We're doing a cross-pond pod here, everyone. And you have your own podcast, right? That you do for the BBC, no? You just told me?
Yeah, I'm working with BBC History now. So I don't have my own podcast, sadly, but we speak to lots of interesting historical people.
That's who you are to us. We want to get into all things hair and history. So just warming up here, how did this come about? What's with your fascination with hair and history? Which came first, hair or history?
Do you know, it's so funny. I was talking to my mum the other day. It was my 40th birthday the other week, and my mum was reminiscing, and she was like, do you remember when you were a baby, you were terrified of bald people? Apparently, if I ever met bald people, I would just scream and cry. And I was like, that's so weird that that's my origin story. And now I do this. I didn't remember that, obviously. But in terms of my job, so I studied fashion at university, and I was always more interested in fashion history and kind of the academic study side of things. And when I graduated, I just kind of fell into beauty journalism because that's what happened. And I worked for a publication called Hairdressers Journal. And that is a trade title for the hairdressing industry. So a weekly magazine for hairdressers and salons. And they started publishing it in the 1800s.
I was about to say, it sounds so historical, right?
Yeah.
Hairdressers Journal. I could picture the first issue.
I can send you a picture of the first issue. It looks exactly how you'd imagine. And so, yeah, because it was weekly and it's, 200 plus years old, we had the archives in the office. So because of the kind of person I am, if I was writing a feature about the bob is in fashion, I would go back to the 1910s issues and read about what challenges hairdressers faced when they were doing bobs the first time around. So, yeah, that kind of was where the fascination began. And yeah, it continued from there. I'm a big fan of a storytelling, research, digging into archives. That's my happy place. So, yeah.
It's interesting you said you studied fashion because you often hear about fashion historians. That's a real academic pursuit. People can study that. But so far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, there isn't that the equivalent for beauty. Why do you think that is? Or is beauty part of fashion?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. But I think as people who work in beauty, you know how different they can be. And we have beauty editors on magazines and fashion editors and watch editors. We certainly used to. And I think a lot of people have worked really hard and a lot of places have been very generous in kind of putting fashion in that more academic space. It's probably still not fully respected in the same way that other areas of academic research are, but fashion is kind of getting there. And we understand now that it is a way of allowing us to share stories and kind of share common experiences. But yeah, beauty isn't quite there yet. And yeah, hair, even less so, I would say. It's kind of a footnote in history.
I feel like it's always been sort of shoved. Even in magazines, it was like fashion and then beauty was this little sliver, this afterthought. It's like, oh, and we'll sprinkle in some beauty.
And I think, especially dealing with hair is a universal shared experience. And particularly when you step out of sort of a white Western lens, there is so much meaning and politics and cultural belief and religion and stuff all kind of tangled up in hair, to try and avoid using a hair stereotype. But there is so much meaning to hair. And we haven't really kind of got to a point where people kind of understand that, I think.
Why is it so emotional? Before we talk about what you do and everything, hair is like even more so than clothing and makeup.
I mean, I always say, people always think my job is really funny or they don't take it very seriously, but they can tell you exactly a bad haircut that they once had and how it made them feel and how long they were bothered by it and how it changed their life. So hair is important. It means something to you. You just we kind of dismiss it as being this frivolous thing. It's such a visual signifier, perhaps more so than fashion, I think, because, it's a body part as well as a hair accessory. So it's kind of super close to us. And the obvious things like we can express our identity and kind of what we want to look like through our hair, whether we want to kind of feel better or kind of like trial a trend. But it's also something that lets us kind of fall in line with or reject beauty standards or gender expectations, or it allows us to kind of connect to our community and our culture and traditions and religion. It tells us in a really quick glance who we are or who we want to be perceived as. And I think the fact it is like a biological part of us makes it much more important than fashion. Or not important, more connected.
When you lose it or it changes, that's what's so painful about that.
Yeah, I mean, anything that happens to your body that you don't have control over is scary, but particularly when it is something that is tied up with your identity.
Yeah, or someone rejects that part of you, or someone doesn't like your hair or criticizes your hair. So you're on Fat Mascara, not just because you are a lovely person, but you have this great Instagram account, The Hair Historian, at The Hair Historian. I met you a little bit before you started The Hair Historian through this program called Mastered, which was a really cool program. It's morphed into something a little bit different than its original concept. But Mastered was really all about bringing editorial talent, like the top editorial talent, and connecting them with people who are trying to break into the industry, and almost like connecting people who were like young burgeoning makeup artists with the top people who are working at Bazaar and Vogue. So that's how we met. We went through like this really cool program that we went to like Canada to like.
We did. A field in Canada.
Wait, why were you guys on a field in Canada?
Sum it up.
Yeah, sure. So we ran the courses for like a 6-month kind of period, and we would always end with a live event where we would get all of our students. So the courses were taught online, and we would bring everyone together in like a global destination for like a 3-day extravaganza where they would have lectures and they would all go and do a photo shoot together, and it was like collaboration in action. It was very special. And we always chose weird and wonderful places, which is why we were in a field in Canada.
I love that.
It's very cool. My first and since last time in Canada, but love to go back. Awesome talent there. But I'd love to know who really inspired you at that time, because you got exposed to a lot of really top talent then in terms of hair.
Yeah, we were so lucky to work with so many amazing people. And I think that speaks to the generosity of the beauty industry, that these really top name talents were very willing to speak to people who were starting out in their career. A lot of them had never done a photo shoot, or, they'd done a really terrible photo shoot themselves in their back garden or whatever. And these really huge names. So we worked with Sam McKnight, we worked with Guido on hair, and they gave up their time because they wanted to help the next generation of session stylists coming through be better at what they do, which is just enormously generous of them. They gave up so much time. And yeah, they're just incredibly talented, interesting people.
What is it about Jen and I feel like we talked about this before. Like, I never want to generalize people like, oh, makeup artists like that or hair people like that. But sometimes you do notice like a through line on set, or like, oh, that must be the makeup artist. That must be the hair person. There's something about hairstylists that you feel there's a commonality?
Yeah, I mean, it's the physical connection. You spend your whole day touching people. And so you are close to people, and that's where people tell their hairdressers everything and why they have these, you stay with your hairdresser, and it's such a big deal finding the right hairdresser. And I think, yeah, the physicality of it is definitely a part of that. You can't spend all day touching someone's head and not be a good person, I don't think.
I like that.
They are always people, if that makes sense. They're easy to talk to.
Yeah, and I think so much of it coming up through the salon, most people have a kind of salon background, I guess, and it's very... so much mentoring goes on in salons, and you kind of, well, if you have a good boss, which hopefully you do, you're being trained every single day and you're part of a team and you're talking to people from all walks of life. So I think that makes hairdressers quite uniquely placed to be good, kind people who are interested in the world around them.
I love the way you've said that. Yeah. You're at Mastered. It was a really incredible program. I do think just seeing, you said it spoke to like the kind of generosity of the beauty industry. I do agree with you. I think the beauty industry attracts really good people. I think by and large, really good people and generous people and people who want to learn and use their hands and create something special with people. So you're working with people and then you're like, okay, I'm so into hair. Where does the hair historian come out? Like, were you doing that on the side, on the field, like saving pictures in your phone? Or how did that jump?
Yeah, literally that. So I think so, yeah. From the start, when I was at Hairdressers Journal, we obviously had all of this amazing editorial imagery. We had adverts, like pictures of salons. Like the magazine did like an interior design feature every week. So we had like, what does the new salon look like in 1932 in
That's cool.
Some small town in England. So I just like saving those things for my own personal research interest. And then, the hair historian is kind of slightly adjacent to it in that it's art, it's hair in art. So art is my other big passion in life. And I think spending my whole life being around hair, you start noticing it in paintings and it kind of infiltrated that way. So it was May 2016 I started, which is 8 years ago. And I have posted every day since, maybe 1 or 2 days off. And
thank you for your service.
You're welcome. My pleasure. I think that comes back to Mastered actually in many ways, because I'm not saying everyone has to be inspired by the same things as me by any means, but I find a lot of inspiration in art. And I think when we were doing a lot of mentoring with the students, finding people bringing the same reference pictures on a mood board, you see the same pictures all the time, or people don't quite understand how to start with a reference and then turn it into something. So I would spend a lot of time talking to people about kind of art that I liked and shoots that had kind of been born from that and kind of where that dotted line goes and learning that it's not just like a direct correlation. I mean, sometimes it is, it's just let's recreate this painting, but often it's like the mood that it's conveying or a feeling or the energy of it or the colour of it, whatever. So the hair historian began just me sharing paintings I liked that had interesting hair going on, and it's kind of grown.
So what's the first picture you posted?
I was trying to remember that earlier, and I genuinely can't remember, and I can't be bothered to scroll back for 8 years. But my guessing, I have a very strong inkling that it was Lady Lilith by Rossetti, which is a classic Pre-Raphaelite painting in that it has a lot of red hair. It's Lady Lilith sitting, brushing her hair. That was my profile picture for years, so I think it was probably that. And
what is the reference you were getting a lot? For a hair reference, you were getting a lot from your students.
Oh, like Kate Moss, always. I mean, that's London, so I love Kate Moss. And Kate Moss is brilliant and amazing and has beautiful hair. But I think, and you two will know this as well as I do, when you go backstage at Fashion Week and you say, because that was another part of my job, was interviewing people at Fashion Week, you say, what's the reference for the show? And they're like, it's Kate Moss with nothing in her hair. And it's like, cool, well, I can't write a report on that because that's like, oh my God. It just doesn't get right. So and you know this full well, like the session stylists who have these crazy references or they've created a character and they're telling you this whole story. It's like, thank God I can like fill 2 pages with this. It's not just Kate Moss rolled out of bed, she looked good, like cool.
Oh my God. It's sometimes you just have to laugh because like you don't even, I don't know why. What did they say before Kate Moss? I don't know.
We'll never know.
I don't know. That's really funny. So, okay. So you set it up, you're pumping out the pictures. I noticed you do a lot of Pre-Raphaelite. We'll get to that. I think it's the redheaded thing. But what portrait, what sculpture, like what is moving you the most from like a hair perspective? What is constantly coming up for you?
I mean, the red hair is a bit embarrassing because obviously I have red hair too. It's two redheads on the call. Red hair is just interesting, and it's interesting from
All right,
our
let's talk about it
perspective.
now. Let's just talk about it now.
Let's
Get it over with.
I'll allow it.
It's just like the Pre-Raphaelites are obviously not the only ones who do red hair, but red hair is very prevalent in their work. And, it's the eye-catching element of it as much as anything else. If you want your painting to stand out in a room full of other paintings, give the person red hair because it's very bright and draws the eye.
Cheap shot.
It's true, though. I mean, so red hair is mythologized like throughout history. It's associated with like witches and vampires and the devil. And this is because so few people have red hair naturally. It's something like 2%, 3% of the world's population has red hair. So it's interesting. So if your Pre-Raphaelite art is often allegorical, you're trying to tell a story or symbolize something. If you're trying to symbolize that a woman is like a fallen woman, giving her red hair kind of is a shorthand that people understand that this person is like other somehow. So there's that kind of metaphor, kind of a storytelling element to it. But yeah, it's eye-catching and it's different.
That's interesting that she is other.
Mm-hmm.
And all right, I got to ask you, like now, because if you look on your feed, everything feels very historical. It feels like you're walking into a little, mobile Louvre. It's a museum. But if you were, 100 years from now, it's not that there aren't interesting hairstyles now. So you must look at the current moment with a historical eye, with an academic eye. So are there interesting hair moments today that feel like they could, if you put like a sepia tone wash on them, if you elevated their surroundings a bit, do they feel hair historical? Are there any celebrities, any models? Forget about Kate, but you know what I mean? Like, are there any moments that feel really interesting in that same way that they could be? And I'm not suggesting you put them on your feed, but they could be on your feed.
I think it's interesting. I feel like we're kind of on a precipice of interesting stuff happening with AI and technology because most hair that we see is kind of probably referencing something else. It's quite hard to be doing something completely unique right now because we have seen so much. But I think technology is really going to change the way we do things. I'm so excited and like it's obviously a bit scary, but like seeing how color in particular will develop with the future. I think that's going to be really interesting and kind of achieving those looks that currently are photoshopped or like AI generated. Seeing things like that becoming a reality feels like that would be really interesting because I do think, there's so much great hair. There's people who look amazing everywhere. Not saying there isn't, but is any of it kind of completely new and groundbreaking? And like, I have never seen anything like that in my entire life. Probably not right now.
But some of the hairstyles on your phone, like on your feed, like they're not, but they're not necessarily groundbreaking. It's just they're so stunning, or they fit that person, or they fit that moment. It's like a mood.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's really nice when you see people kind of have this brainwave moment of when you look at a painting from the 16th century and the hair looks exactly like someone's hair looks in an editorial shoot, and there's this like connect going in their brain of like, oh, people have always, and it's not saying, oh, nothing's original and like being really down on people for not having original thought. It's just like, oh, it's so interesting that we have this connection with the past of people doing things with their hair because they thought it looked interesting or because it meant something to them, and we can see that continue. And I think it's more, I think that's kind of romantic and interesting versus being like, oh, no one has an original idea. I know you weren't saying that, but that's where my train went.
No. I that's interesting. I think of like moments that say something about the person or the moment. Like, call me crazy, but I think of Demi Moore with her short hair. I'm going back for 3 decades now. But to me, that like looking very strong, to me, that's like a hair historical moment. Because it's like, oh, we're going like beautiful and short and hardcore. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like a buzz cut. That is like a hair historical moment.
Yeah, I always think kind of hair that is like protest or kind of saying political is always super interesting, and they're kind of like the moments in history when we think about hair, and it gives it like whether that's Black Power movement and the Black is beautiful wearing hair natural, or whether it's like the punk movement, and times when people are doing something that we haven't seen happen. it's so interesting. And that's, I think, helps people understand that hair is connected to bigger things. That isn't just like, oh, it's about looking nice. It's actually is making a point, and it is saying something.
like subverting her sexiness, like that kind of thing. Do you have a favorite Madonna hairstyle?
I am Ray of Light era, probably. Like,
correct answer. Correct answer.
Speaking of Raphaelite, isn't that one of her references for the?
I think it probably would be if you look at the lighting.
Yeah, I'm picturing her album
Everything
covers.
everything's very painterly and has and she just gave birth to Lourdes. So yeah, and the whole
and
album
I know all the details of exactly what was happening that year in that moment. Thank you, Jess.
See Little Star.
Yeah. Can we go further back in history a little bit? Let's go pre-Demi, pre-Madonna, go all the way back. I know where Jess's history
I went really
starts.
far back, guys. I went like 30 years back.
I feel like some people, like, they have their era. You know those people that, like, she should have been from the 20s. They just have that vibe. Jess is like an early 90s.
I'm firmly where I'm from.
I know.
Like from
okay.
the right
You're
spot.
of your time. Actually, Rachel, is there an era in history that you're like identify with, hair-wise or otherwise?
Good question.
Oh, I mean, I just have really big curly hair. But I feel like a 70s kind of moment.
You're giving us a Peter Pan collar right now. I'm getting the like Mary Quant to 70s vibe. Like,
I was looking at some pictures for work the other day of the first ever Glastonbury, which was 1970 or 71, I can't remember. And there was all these people just walking around looking amazing, and their hair was all just like slept in a field and got up, and they all had this like incredible hair. So I feel very like I'm a hippie at heart for sure.
Do you have a cutoff for where hair historian will like not accept submissions?
Well, most of it's just what's out of copyright, because when you're reposting images, it has to be wherever it is now, about the 20s. So that's kind of the boring side of it, is what images are in public access.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, going further back then, because this is definitely out of copyright, I want to talk like prehistory a little, just meaning like pre the written word and all that. Like you said, hair is a body part. And I was thinking about this and I was like, are we the only species that has head hair like that in both genders?
I mean, yeah, pretty much in terms of like doing stuff with our hair.
But like a lion has a mane in the male sex, but not the female. Like I was like, we're unique that way, aren't we?
Pretty much, yeah. And I think so much of it boils down to reproduction and finding a mate ultimately, and the idea of having lots of hair making you kind of virile if you're a man, or if you're a female, you know, she's like a healthy woman in like the prime of her life because she has long, thick, lustrous hair. So I think that ties into it.
It's a health signifier, yeah.
Sure.
I hate thinking of that way.
It's true, though.
Have we always been styling it though? Like we go way back in history. Have we been doing stuff with it?
Yeah, so in terms of like prehistorical, we don't know for sure. You know, there isn't the evidence of necessarily what people were doing. But what we do know is kind of as soon as people do start kind of documenting history, we know people are doing stuff with their hair. So there is every reason to believe that prehistory, they were doing stuff with their hair. And, you know, you think about these large swathes of history, doing something with your hair is about practicality, whether you're like out on a battlefield or you're like stoking an open fire, you're probably going to have done something with your hair because it would just be annoying not to. So I think the human element of it is very important because, yeah, we don't know what they were doing, but probably they were braiding their hair or they were tying it back in some way. And then as soon as you get into like Egypt and Rome, there are hair combs, there are hairpins. There is pretty much as soon as we start recording human history, there are things relating to hair to it, whether that's hair dyes or anti-hair loss methods. Like all of these things date back centuries because people are obsessed with their hair and they always have been. And like I have some friends who do metal detecting. They like go out with those things, and they found like a Roman hairpin the other day, just like in the field by their house.
How did they know it was a Roman hairpin?
Because they're really good at archaeology, I guess.
Wow.
But she sent me a picture of it, and she was saying, oh, you know, I had this really emotional moment holding this hairpin and thinking a woman styled her hair with this however many hundred years ago, dropped it one day, and now I've dug it up.
Just like we would drop like a little black elastic band or something.
Yeah, and then hundreds of years later, someone picks it up.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the Hairdresser's Journal, and you were talking about the salons. Can you tell us about a salon that really kind of impressed you or just stuck in your mind?
Well, the first thing that always comes to mind, I don't know if they're still open.
Or barber shop or something like that, yeah.
Well, I mean, this is just like having a nice life moment, but I went to New York with Bumble and Bumble on a press trip with Hairdressers Journal very early on, and it was their salon that was down in the meatpacking district, and they had no windows, and it was just, that's not true. They had all windows. They only had windows. They didn't have mirrors. You didn't sit in front of a mirror. You sat and you looked at the view over New York. So obviously, that's always nice to get to see that beautiful view, but it was a psychological thing of like, no one likes sitting, staring at themselves in the mirror for 3 hours while they get the colour done, really. So they just sit you and you looked out over New York. And I mean, it was a special moment because it was a real privilege to get to do things like that. But it was also just like, anyone who's doing anything interesting in the beauty space, I'm always interested in. And the fact that they were like, oh, okay, people don't like looking in the mirror, so let's not make people do that. And, you know, they had a mirror for the hairdresser to do their checks or whatever, but it was just like this understanding of it being something deeper than just like a maintenance appointment. It was like, let's make this a special occasion for someone. So that definitely stands out.
I wonder, this might be out of your purview of like knowledge, but when did women get hair salons? When did we start going to a place together to do it instead of like in our homes?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this the other day who was researching something, and it's kind of later than you would imagine. I feel like kind of 1800s-ish, because if you were a rich person, your hairdresser would come to your house.
Yeah.
If you were a poor person, you'd probably just do your hair with your friends or a family member or whatever. So yeah, it takes a while for hairdressing as a kind of business endeavor like that to become a thing. But yeah, I feel like it was around that time. I can't quite remember, but yeah.
I realize salon, we talk a lot about like salon culture, and I feel like some of our conversation can be very New York centric because Jen and I are based in New York. So it's like, well, we talk about salon culture in New York because that's changed dramatically. There used to be very big salons. It used to be like
Kenneth, if we're going to like the big.
Okay, you want to go back. It was like Kenneth, and then Fakai in Miami, Orbe. Why am I struggling to think of other big ones? Yeah, Sally. Orlando was the owner of his salon, but everything was like the $400 haircut, then a balloon to $800, then it was crazy. Now, your average bear is not going to these salons, but in New York, these dominated the scene. Now, it's no longer like that at all. I'm curious if you have a perspective on just salon culture at all and how things have changed just as a profession for people who want to enter the industry. Because I think it's very different in the past 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, in England, we have seen a real rise in the kind of rent-a-chair workspace, which I know was a big thing in the US prior to COVID, and I'm sure has continued to be the case. And that wasn't really a thing over here. And that is now a thing. I read about it constantly, that a new space has opened up and you just come and you rent your chair, you do your own thing, you have your own space, but you're part of a bigger group, I suppose, so you feel connected and you don't have to deal with all the admin of paying for everything yourself. That has really been a thing over here.
Yeah, the collective.
Yeah, and I feel like the big salons over here have definitely faced the same things. Like, I'm sure some of them are still going, like your Trevor Sorby, Vidal Sassoon, all those kinds of people. But particularly where I am in South London, it is all about like small salons, particularly I'm in the Black community. Like South London is famous for like barbershops and black hair salons. Lots and lots of independent people. Like the rise of the freelancer has been so interesting on a professional level for me. Like when I first started out, freelance hairdressers kind of had a bad name. You go around to someone's house and you cut their hair while their kids are running around.
Oh, I used to go to Mary Jane's basement. Yeah, and that was not normal. I remember Mary Jane like it was yesterday, and it was like she had the barber's chair in her basement, and it was like all the girls at school went to like a cool salon, and I was like, I'm going to Mary Jane in her basement, and it did not feel cool. But now that's like kind of how you do it. Oh my God, shout out to Mary Jane. She gave me my mullet. I remember everything.
Oh my God.
Jess and I both had mullets at age 4 or 5.
Oh my God.
We have like pictures of like our matching mullets.
Oh my God. I had like the guy from Eastbound and Down, Danny McBride's haircut. I looked like Eastbound and Down.
But it was awesome. I thought I was so cool. It was such a great look. I was like mini Joan Jett. I don't know.
Oh my God. It was
Do you remember any of your
real.
early hairstyles, Rachel?
I never really had much going on. I just had long hair forever because my mum is a hippie and just also had long hair. And then when I was like maybe 12, I wanted a bob with a fringe, bangs. My hair is very curly and big, and I wanted this like slick 90s bob. There was a band called Republica who I don't know if made it to the US. I know you know.
Yeah.
She had this like slick black box bob.
That is a difficult hairstyle.
It's a difficult
You better
hairstyle
have
for someone with
straight hair.
Yeah. So I don't know why a hairdresser ever humoured me with this request, but I had that for a while and it was terrible and I have never done that again. And in like 20 years of writing about hair.
She had a great look.
She was amazing. Yeah, all the press appointments I've ever been on, I often ask people if I would suit bangs and they're like, no, absolutely not. You should never do that with your hair. And I'm like, good. I'm glad that just never worked out. It was never meant to be.
I am dead.
Wait, you bring up a good point about the grass is always greener, that throughout history, I feel like when you look at some of the paintings you post and things like that, we never are happy with just what we have. If we're straight, we want curly. If we're curly, we want straight. If you're a redhead, you want the black hair. Is this true through time? Like as you look at these paintings, like none of that's like wake up out of bed, wash and go.
No, I think there's this universal desire for what you don't have. And we see so many, like there are recipes dating back to Egypt, Rome, of like treatments to make your hair go blonde or treatment to treat grey hair. Or
they
like
had sun in Egypt?
They did. They really did. And most of these ancient recipes are like really disgusting dead animals being burned up or like flowers and things. But like one of my favorite ones is in like 16th century Venice. There's this written history and there's beautiful illustrations too, which I have shared at some point on Instagram. But there was this trend in Venice for blonde hair. And obviously Italian women at the time kind of had naturally darker hair and they would paint their hair with some mixture of, I think, horse piss. I'm sorry, that's what they were using.
God.
But the
Okay,
interesting
we've got our ammonia. All right, we're making some dye here.
But the interesting thing was they have these solariums, like on the top of their houses, they have these sun terraces built and they had these special hats, which are like a big straw hat, but with the top cut off. And you would put your hair through the hat, so basically like a bleaching cap, and you would sit on the sun terrace. And like there is descriptions
soaked in horse
and
piss.
illustration. Mm-hmm.
It must have worked for one person and other people would try it.
Of course it did.
Like, obviously, that wasn't going to create a platinum blonde effect, but it's that kind of strawberry blonde that you see in a lot of Italian Renaissance painting. And yeah, Italian women didn't have that colour hair at the time, and this is how they were achieving it. We have always done these strange things to ourselves because we wanted to look slightly different.
I can see the TikTok video already. Someone's going to get a straw hat, cut the top out, splay out their hair like a sun, and paint it with something like this.
Italian
is the kind of stuff
girl
we do now.
summer.
Humans are so resourceful, right? The minute you want a hairstyle, someone's going to figure out, let's make a Velcro roller or whatever. There's some ridiculous contraptions we've used to get our hair to look a certain way, right?
Yeah, and like technology and innovation go so hand in hand with trends. I mean, perhaps less so now we're at a point where lots of things are possible, but I feel like so many big hair trend moments, when people ask me to quote on them, it's like that goes arm in arm with some product being released or like,
oh, wait, give us an example. Yeah.
I got to ask you, what do you think is talking about trends? This is more for like the gentleman, but more like young gentlemen. But what's up with like the alpaca style? You know what I'm talking about? And I wish this is where being a podcast fails us, but like, you know what I'm talking. Just Google like alpaca boy hairstyle. It's like with that little fluff in front of the head.
I mean, again, like curling irons date back centuries and like obviously not in the way that we know them now, but just an iron rod being heated up and wrapped around the hair over an open flame. That is something people of all genders have done that. And like there's histories of like Assyrian men, so like way back, using them on their beards to like make curly beards because curly beards were considered attractive. And so like people have always sought the means to like fuel creativity and innovation so that they can achieve the beauty look.
Why do you think the alpaca style is like hot now though?
I don't know about that. I don't know why. I don't know. It's cute.
Read my piece in the cut, you guys. Read my piece. I trace it. I have a theory. I'll send you a link.
Well, can you give us, like, for those listening who don't have internet access, can you give...
It's a swoosh. Okay, so that swoosh emo boy hairstyle with like the pompadour front thing, right? That happened right before the pandemic. Then we go into the pandemic, the barbershops close, and all those kids are used to looking at themselves down in a phone with this halo of swoosh hair, but their hair's growing out. And that's your teenage years when you really get used to seeing yourself in a certain way, your presentation of self. So when the barbershops open back up, it's like, they're not going to cut their hair. They've just made 52 videos with them with this big floofy haircut. Let's take it to the next level. If someone's doing like this, it's men, right? And they've got to like one up their friend. I'm going to go even bigger. I'm going to curl it even tighter. It's like the perm got more permy, and now we've got the alpaca boys walking around like a bunch of broccoli. True or not true?
I totally true.
That's my theory. Question though, you said we look for a look and then the technology to get it comes there. But maybe I hear you saying sometimes the technology comes along and that influences the look. Like, oh, we can heat hair and it'll curl. Then tight curls were in. Are there any other examples where like a technology or a tool came about, like electric razor? Now we're doing Vidal bobs. I don't know. Like, does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, like hairspray is a really interesting one. So hairspray develops from the technology that I believe the US military were using on like a bug spray. So when they were sending troops to hot countries, they were making bug spray. And products to hold hair in place have existed since time began. People have used whatever, but somehow along the way they decide that they're going to use the cans that contain the bug spray and use them for hairspray. And so this starts happening in like the 1940s when we start seeing all these hairstyles that are very set in place, and suddenly you've got an easier way of doing it. Rather than having to coat your hair in sugar water or whatever, you suddenly have a can. And in the 1950s, hairspray overtakes lipstick as like the most sold beauty product in the US, just because the technology is there that it can get quicker and easier and cheaper to make.
So even the women who couldn't go to the salon to get their bouffant, you have this aerosol hairspray, you can do it at home. That's why it was such a prevalent look. It was like everybody had that hair in America in the 1950s. I don't know about elsewhere in the world, but...
Yeah, for sure. And like, yeah, you can use cans to set your hair on. You don't need to have the rollers necessarily. As long as you have like a round item that you can like set your hair on, you're good.
Yeah. So is everything old, like is nothing new anymore? You've seen it all. Every time I see you quoted in a newspaper, you're like, okay, yep, we've seen this before. This checks out. Here's where it goes back to.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I'm excited to see new things. It's always exciting to see stuff. But I guess we just have such a world of information and visual references at our fingertips that it's like, it's no wonder we're all just inspired by things.
If it's going to be new, is it going to look good? Like anything new I can think of doesn't seem great.
I think of color, though. Like, we couldn't do neon hair or like not Eon Flux, but like you were talking about the new metaverse and how that's influencing our hair as like we look like anime or computer, like that kind of thing. We couldn't make neon colored hair before very recently.
Yeah, I mean, we could
Naturally.
do it with weird things. I've been doing some research around like pink hair, and, there's pink hair in like the 70s and 80s when people are just using like food dyes or, commercial inks. Like people have always used whatever they had at hand to make their hair look the way they envisioned it. But yeah, like the fact that we now have technology that you can have neon hair without messing up your hair and without like ruining it, that feels very exciting. And yeah, I do think color feels to me like the space where there's going to be the most exciting innovation.
More improvements. Yeah, like more technological improvements.
I mean, I love the idea of color that would literally, like people claim that they can do these things, but color that you could just literally strip out. So you could be like a redhead one day, black hair the next day, blonde, blue, whatever, and it would do no damage. And you could literally just like, that feels like the Jetsons future that I've been waiting for.
There's been fits and starts. Every time I see a startup that thinks they have that technology and then I follow back up and it always falls through because it's always like they figure out some way that it destroyed your hair that they didn't realize they were doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, also this is what wigs are for, so it's fine. We have solutions.
About your hair, how do you approach styling? You said you're red, you're curly. Like, do you do it every day? Is that natural? Tell us everything.
I'm very lazy. I value sleep above all else, so not much goes on. So it's curly, so I do like a one day, I wash it like probably once a week, and then I am like spraying it with the water spray every other day. At the moment, the weather in England has been so bad, and air drying season is my season. The least I can do, the better, and the weather has been so bad, I've not been able to do any air drying, so it's very sad. But yeah, diffuser, drying it, and then I just leave it for a week, and it gets gradually bigger.
Do you have a dry shampoo you like?
Yeah, I use a bunch of dry shampoos. So I like a nice curl cream. There's a brand called Skim Do who do a curl cream, which I can't find in the UK, but that's fine. They do a really good curl cream.
Skim Do. It's an American brand?
Yeah, so there is a hairstylist called Ruby Jones in New York who has a space called Salon, which is like a salon that clients can go to, but it's also like an education space, research center for hairdressers. She has an amazing library of hair books. She does really cool community events. And she and I became friends over the internet. So when I go to the US, I go see her in her salon, and she sells Skim Do. And then there's also a brand over here, Dizziac, who I love. I don't know if any of your other English guests have mentioned Dizziac, but Dizziac is a shampoo and conditioner and she does a few other bits and pieces as well, but it's very good for curly hair, so I love her. And then Dry Shampoo is a brand I used to work with called Authentic Beauty Concept, who are a German brand who are very vegan and sustainable. They have very nice dry shampoo.
I like that. Vegan, sustainable. What about other beauty products? Like if we went in your little kit, what would we find?
I'm very lazy. It's really bad. I spent so long working in the beauty industry and then I kind of stopped caring so much.
You hit a wall.
I hit a wall, yeah. I love Glossier foundation and concealer like everybody does. I have the Rare Beauty blush, which last time I was in the US had just come out. And
Classic.
I was very excited to go into
New
Sephora.
New classic, I should say. Yeah.
I was like fighting all the 10-year-old girls to get to it. And then lipstick, the Charlotte Tilbury, same one that Jess uses, which I think I probably started using because you recommended it at some point.
What's your shade? I forget.
I think, was it Bitch Perfect at
it
that
was
time?
Bitch Perfect, yeah.
Yeah. I think during that trip, I was a heavy Bitch Perfect user. I actually need to get back on it.
Wait, what shade is Bitch Perfect? Someone describe.
It's like really pink. It's like a pale pinky beige, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. I think I remember like reapplying in the sun.
It's good for redheads, exactly.
It was like very hot. I remember that trip was very hot.
It was hot.
It's like frying in the sun.
Yeah. And what else do I use?
Are you any fragrances or candles in your life?
Yes, I have, my favorite fragrance is a really old one. And this is kind of what everyone I know associates with me. And I don't know how I will live when I run out of my supply. But Agent Provocateur had their original perfume in a pink bottle.
Oh my God. Look like a bomb, like a grenade.
Yeah. And I started wearing that before I moved to London. So like 20 years ago. And I have so many boxes of it. People always, my late stepmother would always buy it for me. So I have like boxes of it and it smells like it's like sexy old lady is kind of the vibe they were going for. It's very heavy. Everyone I know would associate it with me and I love it. And one day it will be gone.
Do they still make it?
Yes.
No, they don't.
No, they don't?
I don't think so. Well, they're not here, I don't think.
Oh, I misspoke. We will have to, if we ever see any on eBay and stuff, we'll start gathering for you.
That fragrance reminds me of like Dita. I don't know what your association is, but it comes from like Dita Von Teese kind of like vibes.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I get it. It reminds me of like being like 21, living in London, cigarettes, beer, Agent Provocateur perfume to cover the rest.
Yeah. It's very powdery. It's very dry.
Yeah, it really is. And then the other one I love is the Man & Goetz Cannabis, which is like the polar opposite, which is a very fresh, crisp one.
That goes more with the fashion you were giving me, like the hippie girl vibes. The other one's more glamorous, but you
keep you on your
multitudes.
toes.
Yeah.
That Man & Goetz one I bought when I was getting the Eurostar to Paris last summer, and I'd forgotten to pack any perfume, and they had like a pop-up in the Eurostar terminal, and so you could get like a roll-on for like no money at all. So I bought one, and then it's one of those ones when you wear it to work, everyone is like, what is that smell? It's incredible. People love that smell, so that has moved into rotation as well. That's a good one.
Nice.
Before we let you go, should we do a little Fat Mascara 5? Jess, I think you're in charge this episode. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So listen, it's going to be fast. All right. One or two words. What was the first beauty product you remember really loving?
The hard candy nail polishes with the rings, which I couldn't afford, but I wanted.
What piece of art, any kind of art, okay, are you never going to be bored by?
This isn't like a 2-word answer, but I'll be quick. There's a guy called Mark Leckie, and he does these installations, and he did an installation in the Tate Britain that was a recreation of underneath a motorway bridge in the 90s, and he just played like music. It was atmosphere, the light, the sound, everything. It was incredible. And I went to the Tate Britain and sat in it for like 3 days for like an hour at a time. Like the light shifts as if you're sitting under a bridge by night.
Was it room wide? It was like an immersive.
It's like an entire room, and it's just like, it's called Magic Power of Bleakness, which tells you.
Oh, I love that.
It was like being a teenager. It was like the most moved I've ever been by any art in my life, I think, which it was very magical.
That sounds great. That sounds really. How many years ago was that?
Pre-COVID is how I date everything, so like maybe 8.
Yeah, and an installation's so fleeting. It's like you can't go back to that. So it's.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Pre-COVID.
Good answer.
Who's your fantasy interview subject? Could also be a little coffee date.
I feel like Vidal Sassoon, I crossed paths with him through work many a time, but never spoke one-on-one. And I feel like that would be a very interesting person for my research and also just a chat.
A little part two. Who was somebody that you did interview or like had an encounter with that was really just like, that was special? Not a buddy, like a...
I mean, Guido has to be like just such an interesting person. And I feel like very much on a wavelength of the aesthetic that I like, similar reference points to things that I like. So yeah, it was always a privilege to spend any time in his presence.
What's your favorite snack?
Pretzels, anything salty, but especially pretzels.
And then last, if it's 11 a.m. on your day off, what can we find Rachel doing?
I mean, it's so predictable, but literally an art gallery. That's all I do with my days off.
You are true to your online presence.
I will make a plan and I will like hit up a bunch of things. I have a spreadsheet of every exhibition that's on in London and I sort them by area. I smash them.
I mean, that feels like work a little. I'm just going to say it. That means you love what you do.
Yeah.
Are you a workaholic or no?
Yeah, sadly.
I mean, if it's still a passion of yours, that's how lucky are you to get to work in your passion place.
Also, London has lots of really good galleries, you know? There's lots to see.
Yeah. I'm a fan for life. I think our listeners are too. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on Fat Mascara.
I appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed the show.
It's your reviews and feedback that help us make the podcast even better. Head over to iTunes to rate and review us or email your thoughts to info@fatmascara.com.
We also want to answer your beauty questions and hear what products you love. To share a Razor One product review or to ask a beauty question, email us at info@fatmascara.
If you send it as a voice memo file, we can even share your voice on the podcast. You can also do that by leaving us a voice message. Our phone number in the United States is 646-481-8182.
Thanks so much for listening.